And I will call to order the September 12th, 2024 work session meeting. Can I have a motion to approve the August 8th, 2024 work session minutes? And a second? It's been properly moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, please vote. All right, the minutes are approved. I've got just a couple of items for my chair report. First, I'd like to congratulate CEO Collie Greenwood. Collie has been selected to serve on the American Public Transportation Association's Board Executive Committee. He was selected by APTA as the top 10 transit agency representative. There was a competitive application process, several letters of support, and congratulations, Collie. We're very proud of you.
Thank you.
It's a great thing for MARTA and a great thing for you. I'd also like to say and thank Mayor Bill Floyd for his years of service on the board. Mayor Floyd resigned about 10 days ago, and we are waiting on the appointment list from the DeKalb Municipal Association. So once we have an appointee from that, they will fill Mayor Floyd's board seat. But we appreciate Mayor Floyd's many years of service, his thoughtful comments, and all of his work that he's done on behalf of MARTA. Finally, the last meeting that we had, I believe, board member Ms. Blakely inquired as to the selection process. There had been an ad hoc committee formed approximately 4 or 5 years ago by then chairwoman Ms. Rita Scott about the study of how the board chair rotates. Justice Sears provided us an update on that. The ad hoc committee was formed. Ms. Scott recommended it. Former chair, Mr. Thomas Worthy, was the chair of that ad hoc committee, and they studied the selection process that MARTA had to determine whether or not it comported with industry standards through other agencies. Throughout that list, and what Justice Sears spoke to me about was that there was a study on agencies from whether it be in New York to San Francisco of the various ways. There are some that are more strict, such as New York is a gubernatorial appointee and approved by the state Senate. San Francisco was a more flexible approach with the approval of all of the board. The ad hoc committee studied MARTA's current practice, which is the appointment of a board chair for 1 year that's selected and recommended from the nomination committee and then moved to the board for final approval with an informal service of a 2nd year. And the ad hoc committee found that the formal approval for a year, the informal extension for the 2nd year, and the rotation amongst jurisdictions did comport with industry standards and recommended that that remain the same based on Justice Sears's report from that committee. The only couple of recommendations that the committee said that we could consider as a board would be, number one, to formalize that it was a 2-year term instead of the informal practice of 1 year and then extending it for a 2nd year, and potentially to have the discussion about qualifications and years of service on the board as well to formalize that process. I know that that is discussed in the nominating committee, so I wanted to provide that update. I know Justice Sears has a more full memo that I'll certainly be send around so we can supplement and everybody can read that as well. Are there any questions for me or perhaps Justice Sears? This was, I think, before my time.
Just a quick question. With the discussions that were had, and I was on that committee, so it was kind of left in limbo. So it'd be good to see where we are and what exactly it is that we need to do from this point, from a committee standpoint. So that was my thing, just reconvening, picking up so that we were all on the same page so that we could figure out or make a formal decision as to the route that we were going to take.
Okay, as to what recommendations should be brought forth. And so we'll reconstitute that, and we'll have Mr. Worthy get a date for all of you and whoever needs to be replaced on the committee if there were board members who are on and who are no longer here. Okay, great. Thank you very much. Ms. Scott.
Well, my question is in regards to any ad hoc committees. The board should be informed whenever there's an ad hoc committee established. And so that's one thing I want to make sure of, that we're informed. when there is an ad hoc committee. For instance, the ethics committee that was formed, we weren't aware of it until after the fact.
Okay, all right. I believe that the ethics committee was announced, but we'll make sure that that's the practice. I think, I don't know when you constituted the ad hoc committee for this study, obviously that was before my time, but I think that was certainly communicated, and so that's a good practice, and we'll make sure we're doing that.
Right, and that also was in regards to our having lost our CEO, and all of that was at the same time. But
Right.
after that, the ethics committee was established, and so we didn't know about it until it was established.
Okay,
Yes.
all right, great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else? All right, I'll turn it over to Mr. Greenwood.
Thank you, Chair Power. I'd like to start with just an update on the competitive grants that MARTA is involved with. Really, it's good news, and I'll start with the idea that we've got an FY24 Transit Security Grant Program, which is worth $924,390, and that's going to be used by the MARTA Police, Chief Creer's in the back corner there, to harden and protect MARTA assets around significant events, including college football championship game in 2025 and possible club FIFA games in June of 2025. So that's the tip of the iceberg, but what I really want to do is thank the grants team for their consistent stewardship of this grants process, and thank the individual departments such as MPD for really establishing a reputation for delivering on our projects. That's what allows us to continue to win grants. We actually, we would add that, of course, to the previously announced $25 million South DeKalb Transit Hub Award, just another example of MARTA winning in this area. And in all, there's about $641 million of grants pending consideration for MARTA in total, which includes the mega grant for the Georgia 400 project. So I just wanted to thank the grants team and the individual departments for our continued progress in that area. And somewhat related, Chair Powers, this was an immediate release that we had put out on Labor Day, but with everything that was going on, this may have been missed. I just wanted to bring to everyone's attention that Fitch Ratings, which is one of the country's premier credit rating bureaus, has upgraded MARTA's rating from a AA to a AA+. So you may recall that we had previously been announced as being AAA by S&P and Kroll bond rating agencies, and Fitch had us at a AA. So now this is the second upgrade from Fitch in as many upgrade cycles. So MARTA is doing really, really well in this area. As a matter of fact, MARTA is just one of only 6 transit agencies in the entire country to be rated AAA by multiple rating agencies. So again, good news on the financial front with MARTA. And thirdly, I'd like to introduce Shelley Pert and Ryan Van Sickle as they talk to us about the bus network redesign.
Thank you, Mr. Greenwood. Good morning, Ms. Powers. I'm sorry, Chair Powers, Mr. Greenwood, board members, executive staff. Really exciting day for us in the planning department because we've been working on the bus network redesign since, I think, 2021. If you would, I have a really great team here that I want to quickly introduce. Mr. Ryan Van Sickle, who everybody will be hearing from shortly. He's our Director of Technical Services and Service Planning. We also have Mr. Rashidi, Jackson, I'm so sorry. He's our project manager with HNTB. I also have Andrea Ford, she's our in-house project manager. And not to be missed, Samia McCoy, she's our deputy, and she's heading up most of the infrastructure work that we're doing. And this is just a part of the team. There's a whole other group of people behind the scenes pulling this all together, and we're just really anxious to kind of get into the details with you. Just really quickly, again, just wanted to say that we kicked off in 2021. We've made a lot of progress. We're here to share the updates before we go out to the public. And then once we hear from the public, we will refine and then come back to you again and hopefully get adoption in the spring. But without further ado, Mr. Van Sickle.
Thank you, Shelley, and good afternoon, Chair Powers, CEO Greenwood, members of the board and executive team. We're happy to be here with you this afternoon to share some of the details of the bus network redesign with you and the progress that we've made as we've worked through the project. So next slide. We have a presentation for you today. We'll talk about progress on the project. We'll talk about the big picture of the draft next-gen bus network, which we'll share with you today. We'll talk about the outcomes of that network and what it can do for MARTA and MARTA's passengers. And then we'll close with the road ahead and some next steps as we move forward. Next slide. So starting with the progress report. Next slide, please. So as Shelley mentioned, we started the project. It formally kicked off in 2021. And after that kickoff, there was a development of two hypothetical network concepts that were the basis of the early work on the project. Essentially, those two concepts laid out two very different visions for MARTA's bus network. One of those was a kind of smaller, leaner system with lots and lots of high-frequency service, with the goal primarily being to generate as much ridership as possible. The other one was a much more expansive system with the goal of covering as much geographic ground as possible. And of course, while it was a much more expansive network, it had a lot less frequency in it, and so was less likely to draw some of the ridership that that alternative would. Now, those were hypothetical and really intended to generate public discussion about what people wanted MARTA's bus network to look like. And so we followed the development of those two concepts with a period of public engagement through much of 2022, soliciting feedback from the public about what they wanted the network to look like and what would work best for them. We'll get into some of the details of what those activities were on the next slide. Following the feedback, we returned back to the board, and the board provided us with policy guidance on how to proceed with the project. So we got a set of guiding principles that we'll talk about in a few slides in to help us kind of direct the project, and also a couple of key design parameters that we've implemented through the project as well. With that policy framework in place, then we proceeded in late 2023 and through much of 2024 to actually design the first draft proposal of that network. And so that's what we'll get into the outcomes and some of those details today. We'll have some more next step slides towards the end, but the brief next steps are that we're preparing for a significant public engagement effort to propose that draft to the public, get their feedback, see what they like, see what they don't, and prepare to refine that a bit afterwards based on the feedback that we get from them. We'll return to the board for an adoption process. That would also include public hearings. And then we'll conclude that with a period of pretty intensive preparations to get ready. This will be one of the larger service changes, maybe the largest that MARTA has implemented. So there will be authority-wide efforts to get ready for that. And if all of that goes to plan, then we're targeting launch in late 2025. Next slide. As mentioned, the past engagement activities with plenty more to come on this project. But to start, as we took those two hypothetical concepts out to the public, we held 6 public meetings that had a total of 125 attendees. Some of those were kind of overlapping at a point where we were still doing a little bit of COVID kind of protocols, so we've had those virtually and in person, which is pretty typical now. So we had 4 of those that were hybrid public meetings. We also had 2 that were virtual only, again, with 125 people participating. We had 26 meetings with groups of elected officials and stakeholders. That included city council members, county commissioners, representatives from our partner transit agencies, some of the local institutions like the university systems and public schools, and also some selected members from some community improvement districts and other advocacy groups. Throughout the process, we've also held 16 days of intensive workshops on the network design itself in 2 rounds. One was focused on those 2 concepts. And again, after the board policy framework was provided, we did another one to work up the draft that we'll be sharing today. Those 16 days of workshops were attended by a total of over 150 people. A wide array of people from all different departments throughout MARTA to make sure that we weren't working in a vacuum in planning. And also we had representatives from almost every city and county that we serve. We had land use experts, zoning planners, city managers, and others who are knowledgeable about their communities and also about the projects that they had coming up from a development perspective or from their transportation projects. All told, when we did our public engagement effort, we garnered over 8,000 survey responses about the kind of network that people wanted MARTA to design. While we had a lot of feedback through a virtual online survey, we also did an intensive canvassing effort to make sure that the voices of our riders were captured. So I'm pleased to say that over half of our survey responses were captured in person from transit riders on our system and in our stations. And this number is actually already dated. We've done 9 in-reach learning sessions to educate our colleagues in all of the different MARTA departments about what this project is and what it could mean for them and what it could mean for the authority. So it says so far because that's something we intend to continue doing to make sure that everybody is aware of the project and its impacts. So that's an ongoing effort. Next slide. Zooming in a little bit more into this year, we've completed the first iteration of the draft network design back in January. And at that juncture, we identified some early equity concerns with the first draft. The outcomes were not where we wanted it to be. And so in order to make sure we were following the board's guiding principles, especially the one related to equity, we took a step back and worked on a period of adjustments and improvements to the plan to make sure that we were seeing better equity outcomes. With that work completed in April, then we moved into a period of technical analysis on the draft network. So that's what generated a lot of the numbers and statistics we'll be looking at later in this presentation about the outcomes and what the network can do for our riders. We've also been working to prepare a large volume of public information for the engagement effort. Because this is such a large project looking at the whole bus network, a lot of information is required to make sure we can communicate it to people on the different levels that they care about. Some folks will be looking at the whole system. Some folks will be most interested in just their route, so we're trying to make sure all of our bases are covered there. And then that brings us to today, where we're briefing you, the board, on the project and where we are. So next slide. So the next section, we'll dig into the big picture of the new bus network. And there's a little bit of background information to start on the next slide. Next slide. And so, not to delve too deep into the history of our bus network, which is rich and interesting, but MARTA has made a lot of changes to our bus network over the decades. Since we took it over from Atlanta Transit in 1971 and made some immediate improvements, as the network was reconfigured and modified to account for the rail system's development and growth, as it was critical to major efforts in the 1990s, like the 1996 Olympics. And then as it weathered more difficult times during the recession and the COVID-19 pandemic, the network has certainly changed, but it's been a gradual evolution for the most part. This project gives us a unique opportunity to take a very comprehensive look at the network as a system, and is likely to be the largest and most comprehensive network plan that MARTA has put together since the system was founded. Next slide. And we're doing that armed with guiding principles from the board policy framework that was passed in April 2023. The 5 guiding principles the board charged us with were making sure that this network expands access for our riders, that it provides people accesses to more opportunity, generates ridership, and also has spillover benefits to the economy, the environment, and of course MARTA's fiscal picture. It needs to do this in a way that's equitable, so we are keeping a very mindful eye towards our disadvantaged communities to make sure that this network benefits them equally or greater than anyone else. The network needs to be future-facing, and so we're not designing a network that is solely reactive to what's happened in the region around MARTA. We're trying to make sure that it is building in some accommodations for future growth and development as well. Something I'll dwell a little bit on is the balance guiding principle, and one of those is that the network must find the right balance between the goals of ridership and coverage, which often compete for the same resources, whether it's our operators, vehicles, or dollars. A lot of those things tend to be in conflict with those two goals. So the current network essentially dedicates about 60% of our resources towards providing service that is likely to generate higher ridership. And about 40% of the resources are dedicated towards providing geographic coverage, even though it may not be as inclined to generate high ridership numbers. Through the board policy, we were given a kind of target range of dedicating 75 to 80% of this draft network's resources to ridership and 20 to 25% to coverage. And so the network, I'm pleased to say, landed right around the 75-25 mark, right in the range that we were provided. The last guiding principle is challenges, and that one's particularly important because with the volume of and the scale of this project and the number of changes that it can bring, we know that this will create a net improvement for MARTA and our average riders, but we also know that some customers will be affected in ways that will cause them to object to those changes. So we need to stay mindful about understanding and listening to them as we move forward and making sure we're looking at those concerns very closely. There's one other piece that was actually not on this slide, but that was out of the guiding principles, and that was Clayton County. And so the policy framework also directed us to continue the design work, but to let Clayton County's system continue to evolve through the existing transit plans that were much more recently adopted. As Clayton was a recent member addition to MARTA's system, then there was much more recent bus network planning work done there. So this network largely focuses on Fulton, DeKalb, and City of Atlanta, although there are certainly some benefits to Clayton County service as well. Next slide. So getting into the big picture, and there are a number of benefits we'll cover, but this is the biggest of the big picture items. The draft next-gen bus network will provide 15-minute service, frequent service, to over 3 times as many people as our current bus network. And that's a direct outcome of following those policy principles that the board assigned us to. That creates major improvements in access to jobs, but all kinds of other things as well. Healthcare, access to fresh food, education, social opportunities, spiritual opportunities, anything that people want to do. This network will help them do that faster. That also has major improvements for communities of color and people of low income as well. That frequency is really a powerful ripple effect through the whole system on everybody who uses it. Next slide. And there's some key design features that are incorporated into this network to make this happen. The first is more frequent service, and while that 15-minute range is really, really powerful, I also want to make it clear that we also have frequency improvements at other levels. There are more routes running every 30 minutes instead of every 40 or 45. There are some routes in areas that right now might only receive 60-minute service where it will be up to 40 or 45 minutes. And while those are not as quick and frequent as those 15-minute services, they are still very important and powerful changes. Another one is that this network was designed to have simpler routes and fewer transfers. That kind of covers a couple of improvements. One, the routes are more more understandable for people, easier to remember, easier and more easier to rely on as well. And for MARTA, in a lot of cases, these are also easier and more reliable to operate. By providing these routes, and in some cases, making sure that there are fewer transfers, people aren't having to get off and wait on the side of the road between buses or hop off and spend 20 minutes between buses at a rail station. That's a really powerful way between those two elements to make it a faster trip with less waiting for our customers. Where we do have transfers, there are some designated places in this draft system where we're working to design timed transfer locations, especially where we have services that are less frequent. We're trying to design it so that those routes come together to the same place at the same time, where people can hop off of one bus and then hop onto their next, which will already be there. That way they are not waiting between a 60-minute or a 40-minute route on the side of the road. We're trying to make those transfers as convenient as possible too. And I also want to mention that this network incorporates a new mode for MARTA that we have dabbled with. You may remember from about 2 years ago, the MARTA Reach pilot program, which was our first foray into on-demand service. This network incorporates on-demand fully as its own mode. And so there are a number of on-demand zones where people would be able to use a smartphone or a simple phone call to essentially hail a vehicle to come pick them up near where they are, take them to another location with that zone, or to a connection point to a high-frequency service or one of those time transfer points. So we really are relying on that to be an important element and a very, very useful coverage tool in this network. All of that really adds up to that last piece. All of these are strategies that help us provide customers with access to more places in less time, and a lot of that is by making sure that we are giving them less time to wait. Next slide. And so here is a quick comparison between the two networks. On the left, you have our existing network, and on the right, you have the draft next-gen bus network. And the color coding is very important when you look at these two maps. And so there's a scale at the top. Red lines indicate frequent service. That's the most important takeaway from this map. And so where you see a red line, that bus is running every 15 minutes or more often. 20-minute service is shown in purple. It's a good frequency, but it's not quite up to that 15-minute level. And then you see blues and into greens for the less frequent services, 30 minutes, 40 minutes, 45 minutes, and so on. On the map on the right, and I hope it's coming through clearly, you can see some tan polygons, some tan zones, and those represent the on-demand zones. And so you'll see those are deployed. There's 12 of them deployed through this draft network. To compare the two, the existing network today has 113 fixed routes. Among those, we have frequent service in 5 places on 5 corridors in the existing network, and you can see them there on the map there. There's one near Midtown, and there's 4 others kind of on west and southwest Atlanta. And we have 20-minute service on 9 more routes. We have 5 routes that operate a very limited peak-only service, only during the weekday rush hours, tailored mostly towards kind of traditional office markets. The existing network, of course, includes no on-demand zones. It's just not a mode that we have, although we did have that successful Reach pilot. That's something that we don't have yet. In the draft network, we have 79 fixed bus routes, and we also have 12 on-demand zones. And while it's easy to compare those two numbers between the 113 and the 79, it's important to note that's not the best measure of comparison always. With this network, we've done a lot of route restructuring. Some routes are longer than they used to be. They fold in parts of other routes. And so you see that number changes not just because of the way the network's routes themselves have changed, but also because we have incorporated those on-demand zones in some cases instead of an infrequent fixed route bus. The new network, instead of just offering frequent service in 5 places, offers frequent service in 18 corridors. And you can see the impact of that on the map there, especially combined with our rail system, which has frequent service of its own. You start to get a web of frequent service across the system. We also have 20-minute service on 13 more routes, up from 9. And the system does not have any peak-only services. In fact, the system is designed so that all routes and all zones operate 7 days a week. And largely through the week and most of the day, those frequencies are much more consistent. So where you see a high-frequency line on that map, it would be running every 15 minutes through almost every weekday, most of the weekdays, and also through the weekends. We want to make sure this system is something that works for everybody, whether they are traditional office commutes, working in late shifts or early shifts, retail, or doing other kinds of travel. So the system should be more accommodating to more people for more uses as well. Next slide. So here we'll move into some of the outcomes of this system. And this is where the statistics come in, so I'm going to get ready to go through a lot of numbers. Next slide. To start with, we looked at how many people lived near the system, how many people would have access to get to the system within a quarter-mile walk. And what we found is that the draft network provides over 95,000 more people than the current system with service that's operating 15 minutes or better. That's over a 245% increase from the system that we operate today. 143,000 more people live near a service that runs every 30 minutes. That's a 54% increase over today. And largely thanks to the on-demand mode, and because it's covering a larger area than people would normally walk to get to a typical fixed route, this network actually provides access to over 12,500 people more than the current system. So we're actually able to serve a small number of additional folks through this system than the system we operate today. Next slide. So looking at who the system serves and taking that analysis and extending it and looking at people of color, the system would serve over almost 65,000 more people of color with that 15-minute frequent service. And that's a 232% increase over the system that we operate today. Nearly 88,000 more people of color would live near service running every half an hour. That's also a 45% increase over the system that we have today. Next slide. Looking at how it affects people of low incomes. Nearly over 26,000 more people of low income will be living near service every 15 minutes under this draft network. And again, that's over a 200% increase from the system today. Over 32,000 more people would have of low income would have access to service running every 30 minutes or better, which is almost a 40% increase over the system today. Next slide. Looking at proximity of jobs to the system. The NextGen network serves 93% of the jobs that the system serves today, and it provides much better frequency to many of those. So for example, over 100,000 more jobs will be located near frequent service running every 15 minutes or better. It's over a 100% increase from what we have today. And almost 145,000 jobs will be near service that runs every 30 minutes. So again, about a 50% increase over what we have today. It's also important to note this is still within that 1/4 mile buffer, which is consistent with MARTA's service standards. That really represents about a 5-minute walk to service. There are a number of cases where it may be a 6 or 7-minute walk to some of those additional jobs that fall out of the results of this analysis, but where we've maybe condensed routes together and there's a little bit of an area between them that's a little further than a 1/4 mile. So while we're measuring it this way, we also do expect that people will still be able to reach more of those. Next slide. And digging a little bit more into jobs, here we have a map showing access improvements. So if you look at the map on the right, you'll see a number of mostly green, but also some tan dots. And those dots are color-coded to indicate whether or not people in those areas have an increased access to jobs or a loss of access to jobs. The green represents an increase in access. The strength of the color, as you see the darker green, indicates a higher number of jobs. So the darkest greens indicate that folks in that area have an access to up to 80,000 more jobs than the current system offers. In the tans, it's the same way where you see those, largely they're light brown dots on this map, but that means that there is a decrease in jobs accessible within a 1-hour travel time. It's not to say that people can't get to those, but it wouldn't be within a 1-hour travel time. And the positive takeaway here is that this draft network provides a widespread increase in access to jobs across all parts of the system. On the net, significantly more than we see any kind of loss. The average rider will see an increase of about 18% of the number of jobs they can reach in 1 hour travel time. That's over 8,700 additional jobs beyond the system today. And if they're willing to travel farther than that, it's a 13% increase, but it provides up to over 43,000 more jobs that they would have access to within a 90-minute travel time. Next slide. And then looking at how that breaks down to people of color, people of low income, and people who don't have their own personal access to a vehicle, we see that people of color have a 19% increase in access to jobs. That's 9,200 more jobs that they can reach under the draft network, slightly more than their non-Hispanic white counterparts. If you look at low-income residents, it's almost 12,000 additional jobs, or a 20% increase in the number of jobs that people can reach in the draft network. That's about 2% higher than non-low-income folks. And for people without access to their own personal vehicle, it's about 23,000 additional jobs that they can reach. Ballparked percentage-wise, about with people who do have their own access to a car, but it's still a powerful improvement. Next slide. And we focused a lot about jobs over the last few slides, but I also wanted to make sure that the board understood that's not the only measure that we were looking at. We were looking at other types of places that people go and measuring access there too. So for example, the average rider will have access to about 19% more higher education institutions under this draft network, 26% more hospitals for healthcare, and one that we thought was particularly powerful and wanted to share the map with you was access to fresh food. So the new network provides a 25% increase in grocery stores that the average rider can reach. You can see that we also have a pretty widespread green pattern. It's kind of weighted a little bit to the northeast because there are more grocery stores in the northeast. However, I think it's really important to note that we see gains in green dots in West Atlanta, Southwest Atlanta, parts of South Fulton County, and other places where there simply aren't as many grocery stores as other parts of our region. So we feel very positive about this outcome as far as how it can help people's lives. Next slide. So with all of the numbers and the statistics and the outcomes covered, then we want to talk briefly about the road ahead. Next slide. So we're presenting to you today, and we're preparing for rounds of stakeholder briefings this fall. And that would include revisits to a lot of the people that we spoke to earlier in the project, the county commissioners, city councilors, stakeholder groups who gave us feedback along the way. That's part of also the run-up to a large public engagement effort where we'll go to the public and solicit feedback from people about what they think about the network, what things that they see that they like, what their concerns are. We're expecting a pretty robust response to that because this is such a large-scale project. Using that feedback, and again, we expect plenty, then we'll go back and refine and finalize the network to incorporate that feedback as much as we can in winter. And then following that process, we'll come back to the board for an approval process. That would probably follow something similar to our markup, although a much larger set of service changes, but so it would of course include a formalized public hearing process and some of those formal steps that are required by board policy. Following that, we would launch an extensive preparation period, and that's kind of two sides to that. One is internal, to make sure that MARTA is preparing and ready to implement a change of this scale, and it'll require a lot of work from a lot of different departments to do all of the behind-the-scenes things that need to happen to make a launch go smoothly. But it'll also include a rider education component. We want to make sure that our public, if approved, knows exactly what's coming to their routes and to their neighborhoods and has an understanding of how our service will change and what those changes will mean for them. And then if all of that goes smoothly, then we're targeting a launch in late 2025. So at this point, I'll turn it over to our colleague Jennifer LaRosa, who will go through a couple slides detailing what we're thinking as far as engagement and those upcoming efforts. So thank you. And thanks, Jennifer.
Good afternoon, board members. Jennifer LaRosa, Senior Director of Government Affairs. I'm actually standing in for Ian Cara, the Senior Director of Public Engagement today. I'd like to talk briefly about the next steps in this project. Over the next several months, External Affairs and the planning team will conduct briefings such as the one you received today with a variety of stakeholders answering questions, gathering feedback. That feedback will be used to refine and finalize the network for you to review and then approve. The months following board approval will consist of a system-wide education campaign to ensure customers are familiar with the new bus network before we implement. Our timeline is shown here, but this could slide depending on the feedback received and how refinements made. This is a very big and important project, so we want to make sure that we do it right. Next slide, please. Here we go. Our engagement process will be phased to reintroduce the public to the project and its status, share the details of those proposed network, and then garner buy-in from our customers and stakeholders. There's a preview phase starting this fall. We'll broadly communicate the overall project priorities and benefits for the riders while gaining early feedback from jurisdictional partners and key stakeholders. From there, we'll roll out the proposed network details via the project website as a series of public meetings, pop-up events, and existing community events. Feedback and data collection will be explained more on the next slide, but public input will be incorporated into the final network before the public hearing process and then come to you for approval. Finally, we will conduct rider education prior to implementation to ensure customers are familiar with the new network before it launches. Next slide, please. We have developed several channels through which to collect feedback on the draft network during this phase of the project. Our website will be the main collection point, allowing the digital feedback to maximize public participation. We'll host interactive in-person and virtual public meetings distributed geographically by the jurisdiction, and some public meetings will be co-hosted and or sponsored by jurisdictional offices and stakeholder organizations to expand our capacity and better reach some of those target audiences. We'll prioritize outreach in areas where we'll frequency and coverage changes as a result of the network design, as well as areas with major employment centers. We will also do specialized outreach to MARTA mobility and transit-dependent riders. Comments from the community stakeholders, riders, and members of the public will be logged through a master comment tracker and then logged and analyzed by the planning team. Next slide, and we will take questions.
All right, first, thank y'all all very much. I know that this has been several years with the planning process and all of the implementation, and this has been an enormous amount of work. So first, thank you for all of your effort and a very informative briefing. I've got a question about slide 12. You said that we were going from 113 routes to 79 routes, and that's an elimination potentially of 34 routes, but you made a statement that a lot of those are folded in either to the extension of routes or from some of the on-demand zones. How many of those 34 are folded into the new bus network redesign?
So that's something, it's a little bit to describe. We restructured the whole system. So for example, when we did the workshop setting, a lot of it was actually going through the map and drawing completely new routes together. We can get you an answer on that, on exactly how many were kind of folded into others. But across the board, there were a lot of things that were kind of combined or adjusted. We had some places where it was simple as joining two routes together, so we were giving people a one-seat ride. And then there were a number of other places where we basically redrew an entire district or an entire area. So it's not quite as simple as how many of those were folded in directly like that. But we can definitely provide an answer for you.
Right, and I understand it's not as simple as folding
Yeah.
in, but the ones that are not folded in, if you can also answer when you get that, how many of those now fall within that on-demand zone that we're
Absolutely.
talking about too?
Yeah, and for that, as far as the on-demand zones, in most cases, those replaced parts of lower frequency routes and again, all the restructuring, but those, with I think one exception, did replace some kind of low frequency, low ridership service.
So to be clear, it was not the elimination of service, it's a change of service for that area if you have access to the phone to call.
Exactly, yeah. The on-demand service
Okay.
is a new type of service that MARTA will offer. And so it'll be, instead of a fixed route, it's just a different kind of alternative. It provides a broader level of coverage, so we're actually in those areas able to serve an expanded area over what the existing fixed routes do. And didn't get into all those details in the presentation, but we also anticipate that the wait times for an on-demand vehicle are going to be much shorter than the existing fixed route
That was going to be
service.
my next question, if you had an estimate of the time of the on-demand response.
Yeah, I believe the parameter that we plan to is that the on-demand pickup should be 30 minutes at most. It's something that scales a bit depending on how busy the zone is. So maybe it would be up to 30 minutes during rush hour or during a really busy time like an event. But if it's not busy, the pickup time is likely to be much lower than that. And so even with the 30-minute parameter, it'll be more frequent than, say, the 45 or 60-minute fixed routes that operate in those areas today.
Thank you very much. Mr. Durrett.
Ryan, I just want to publicly say that that was an extremely well-prepared and delivered presentation. It's crystal clear to me what we're doing and why.
Thank you.
And I have been banging the drum for, well, 14 years, saying that the bus service that we provide is the most important service. We're blessed to have the heavy rail system, but it really is the bus service that is the lifeblood for the community that we serve. And I have so much confidence that this is going to be extremely successful, and I'm really looking forward to how we can, in addition to just offering a better bus service, what else can we do to attract riders, choice riders, to this system? And with whom can we partner to deliver the message and make the case and invite people to give it a try? I think that's going to be extremely important. But I really wanted to say that was a great presentation, and I appreciate it very much.
Thank you. And I should take a moment also. Shelley introduced a number of us on the project team, but to thank our service planning team and our transit information team who have been critical in preparing this information as well and doing all kinds of behind the scenes work along with our consultant partners to make sure that we have this project moving. So I want to extend my gratitude and hopefully yours as well to them.
Vice Chair Ide.
Yes, thank you. I totally agree with Jim. This was a fantastic presentation. I can't say I'm as smart as Jim that I understood everything. So I did have one question. If you flip back to the job slide, which I think is 18, because this is one area where people, obviously can get a little stressed if they feel like, will you just explain the map to me again? I didn't understand if you're highlighting where the jobs are, or if you're highlighting where people live.
So the map is actually highlighting where people live, and it's color-coded by how many jobs they have access to, the change in the number of jobs they have access to. So where you see those green dots, it's showing that people in that area have access to more jobs. When you see the dots packed closely together, it's really an indication of population density. You'll see folks who live in higher density parts of town, the dots are closer together, further out where people are maybe in subdivisions a little bit less so. But the green dots represent additional jobs that those people can access in comparison to today's network.
Okay, and the yellow or tan dots represent where there may be less service for those people?
Well, it won't necessarily indicate less service, but it indicates that there are fewer jobs than the existing system available to them under the draft network. A lot of this exercise was trying to make sure we were maximizing the number of green dots and minimizing the brown dots as much as possible. But in those areas, it's not to say that they won't have access to jobs or that they will lose access to our transit system. There are places where maybe service will be changing, but there would not be the same level of access within the 1 hour travel time.
Okay, gotcha. But it doesn't necessarily, did you all look at whether people in those areas were using transit to get to their jobs?
Yeah, and that's a very good point. Ridership data was, of course, one of the critical inputs to this, certainly not the only one. We had feedback from partners and looked at land use and all affordable housing locations and all kinds of other things. But ridership was a key thing. And so also where you see brown dots indicating a loss of access does not mean that the transit system is being used there very often right now. It does not indicate that those are high ridership areas, just that people live there.
Okay, gotcha. That makes a lot more sense to me. Thank you so much.
Ms. Blakely.
Again, amazing presentation, and just to piggyback off of Jennifer's comments, so I noticed of course, in South Fulton, along South Fulton Parkway, we have major distribution centers. Like there's literally an Amazon distribution center every intersection from 285 to 92. We have Walmart, we have Coke, we have other major corporate entities out there. And so some of the existing concerns are the frequency of service, the safety, as well as financial implications, because from what I understand, quite a few of them have to use rideshare to actually get to these major employers. And so I know that you guys have done public engagement and have previously engaged stakeholders, but I want us to make sure that we're looking at those areas where currently, there are these existing problems, and make sure that we address these as best we can.
Understood. Thank you. And I want to make sure maybe clarify something from earlier in the presentation related to Clayton County. while we did not redesign Clayton County's entire network as part of this project, then we also did not have anything that indicated a removal of service or anything like that. Clayton's network largely stays where it is and develops through the existing transit plans that were recently adopted for it. So I just wanted to make sure if you were looking at the maps and you didn't see Clayton County service highlighted as prominently, that's why it is still there.
Ms. Jones?
Thanks for the presentation or the briefing. That provides a lot of insight to questions that I know I have personally received over the past couple of years, so it's good to have this. In regards to jobs access, since this process has started, I know that there is a focus on jobs, but there has also been a transition to the focus on the types of jobs that people can access. Are these livable wage jobs? Are people able to get to green collar, white collar jobs? So what type of consideration was made when talking about jobs access?
Yeah, thank you for the question. One of the things I mentioned briefly was just about how the frequencies on the whole network will largely be more consistent throughout every day of the week. And so a big part of that was making sure that we were not designing this system and tailoring it to kind of older models where there was maybe more of a focus on 9 to 5 typical office jobs. And so by providing the more frequent service across most of the day and through the weekend as well, then this network should serve people who are working all kinds of different jobs and who are reporting to work at different times a day.
Okay. And one other question, what are some challenges you're anticipating for the rollout of this?
Very good question. Just from my time at MARTA, and it's been a while that I've been here, then when we propose service changes in general, then you tend to get folks who are concerned that something is changing first. Mm-hmm. That's oversimplifying it, though. When you look at these things, people will have a real valid concern in a lot of cases that they don't like the trip time. It's going to make them 15 minutes late to work. Or in the more extreme cases, in some of the places in this network that maybe they won't have access to the system anymore if they're currently in one of those places where they may be some of the only people using it there. So we are anticipating a lot of different comments. Also, a number of lighter ones. We expect to get a lot of suggestions from the public who will suggest maybe a connection point 3 blocks away would work a lot better for them. We tend to get a lot of kind of very fine-grained input when we go to the public for things like this, but typically it's concern about the changes and how people affect them.
One more follow-up to that. As you mentioned public engagement, you said there is a time where you'll do more public engagement and then fold some of that feedback into the draft network. What are the parameters for incorporating that feedback?
Certainly. So we plan to track that just for background. As we get public feedback and as we go through that engagement process, we'll be tracking it in real time, and then we'll have that period to compile everything and work on refining. The parameters typically would be budget, just MARTA's overall available resources for the bus operations budget, and the on-demand service budget that will exist at that point. Another one, a key parameter is, again, that ridership and coverage balance. If we retain that, compliance with the board policy framework, then that would also direct what things we can and can't accommodate.
Ms. Scott?
And
Yes, thank you so much for the presentation. My question is, actually my board members, most of them have asked my questions. Two things. The research data, how did it include those that have aged in place, who no longer want to drive? They don't want to get, they have doctor's appointments, they have shopping, groceries, but they don't want to drive in Atlanta traffic anymore. So that we take into consideration those that have aged in place.
we did, yeah. So we looked at the locations for where folks of older ages were living and made sure that we were accounting for that, whether it was demographic data from census or also from specific locations. Our current system serves a number of senior residential complexes right now, so those were also factored in as part of the design. And we also relied, too, for places that may not show up in the data, we relied on our stakeholders and folks who attended those design workshops and who knew those communities very well to also advise us as far as where the system needed to go to serve people.
And my next request is whenever there are public hearings that have been held in DeKalb that as board members we weren't aware. I'm asking and requesting that the board members that represent DeKalb please be made aware.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Ms. Miller?
Thank you. First of all, I want to congratulate you for an amazing effort, a brave effort to embark upon this, and I'm very, very excited to witness how this is going to help transform mobility in the MARTA service jurisdiction and beyond. As you may know, we're looking at the express bus service and having transfer points at a lot of the MARTA stations on the periphery. And I believe more than ever we'll be able to link our express customers from outside the MARTA jurisdiction to even more opportunities inside on a bus than we had before. So from that standpoint, thank you, and I look forward to that rolling out. And congratulations, Kali, on leading this impressive effort. The presentation was also stellar. So thank you. The right level of information and very compelling numbers in a roll-up. I do have a question, a couple questions. One is back to slide 18 on the jobs. I want to make sure I understand 2 points here. Back to the fewer accessible jobs question there is that because there are fewer jobs in those places than there may have been in the prior network? Or it's, I know you had to balance this. This is a tremendous balancing act that you've accomplished.
Yeah. So largely it's a facet of then the places where we reconfigured service and maybe the jobs are further away than a quarter mile, or a couple of places where maybe we're serving markets and people aren't riding to them anymore.
Okay, that's helpful, thank you. The other data question on this slide is the 60 minutes versus the 45 minutes. Is the 8,600 is for 45 minutes, that is not part and parcel to the 60 minutes. The 8,700 is in addition. The 8,700 for 60 minutes is in addition to the 8,600 for 45 minutes, is that right?
So they're inclusive. What you see actually is a very close band between the 45-minute and the 60-minute travel ranges.
Okay.
So actually it may have been a stronger talking point to focus on how many people could get to that number of jobs in a shorter period of time at 45 minutes rather than 60. But yeah, those are inclusive and stack.
Okay, that's helpful. And then the last question is kind of a larger scale, bigger picture question about the analytics. To what degree did it incorporate an understanding, any data around access to automobile at the household, and how that's clearly changed over time, but also accessibility to the bike lane network that's been underway, built out in the city of Atlanta? Is that incorporated into any of the design, the analytics so far, maybe in the design, in the final design?
Yeah, it is. It's not quite visible in these maps. We did have the whole set of access analyses just on folks who didn't have access to a vehicle, and so we had a talking point or two in this presentation about how the network could benefit folks without their own car. But as far as looking at other modes and the bike network and even some of the other micromobility efforts, then those design workshops with the cities and the counties were really critical for that, because we had the folks who were working on their own bike network plans there. And so some of those things, flagged a future need to coordinate, because we want to run a 15-minute service down a road where they're planning to build a cycle track. And so we'll need to work together and make sure that those things are all designed to work in tandem. So, but that was the primary venue for getting the feedback directly from the folks working on those projects.
Yeah, that's certainly the use of space. That coordination is critical for all sorts of reasons, but also the connectivity that the bike lane could enable to households and jobs as that last mile, so to speak, connection for riders.
Yeah, thank you.
Mr. Frierson.
Yes, I want to say thank you to Kali for leaning into this particular area of redesigning this network, and it's been critical, something that we've seen over the years that's been necessary. And thank you to the team for putting this together to make this happen. So what I experience as I ride the bus because I really want to understand what people are experiencing. Everybody takes 2 buses and a train to get to where they need to go. And so this train piece is critical in frequency in which people need to get on the buses so they can get to the train station, get to their destination. I took the time to ride Route 55, which is in the Summer Hill community, and got off and traveled over to the other side and brought it back just to see how does that feel with somebody else who's riding on the system. And then I had conversations with those who are on the bus and what do they think about that. And so it really does tell us a lot. It told me a lot, once again, that the bus system is the heart of what we do. And what we're doing here to really transform this so that we can bring it into line with what current riders are wanting to do is transformative. So it's a heavy lift, but it's well worth it. And I'm glad to see that we're moving in that direction. Data collection process. And do we do that with bus riders that actually get on the bus, or is that done through some other form of means? Because I think that really tells you what people think and feel about the routes that they're on, because they're on the bus. They're getting on and off the bus. And I didn't know how that process worked or how you were able to collect data from that.
Sure, and there were a lot of different data sources that went into this exercise. So some of them, the demographic data would have come from the census. We also had information from partners like the Atlanta Regional Commission, who provide some really good data about where community facilities are and destinations that people are going. And then the ridership data itself is collected on board the vehicle. So all of the buses have sensors over the doors that count how many people are getting on and off. It's all tied into the automatic vehicle location system, which is a GPS system. So the bus is always aware of what stop it's at as it collects that data and helps us identify exactly who is getting, or how many people are getting on and off at each location, at each stop through the system.
That's critical, and I'm glad that you're doing that type of data collecting. And one of the things that I realize is that, with the new bus shelters and the new bus signs that we have, a lot of people are using those QR codes to locate where the buses are in the route. And you can just see it if you just sit there and watch how they're using the system. So great that you're collecting that type of data in that space to make this happen. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Odd?
Yes, I may have missed this, but what are the next steps and when's the rollout expected, and how is that all going to be communicated?
So over the next several months, we'll be doing those stakeholder engagements and also getting into the public meetings. And Jennifer,
and from that, do you expect major changes, minor changes, tweaks, or are they mostly informational?
Okay. Are you speaking about the hearings or the actual rollout of the network? In late
Well, what's the purpose of the future public meetings? Is that informational on?
Sorry about that.
That's okay. I was going to say, I just didn't know, the future public meetings, is that informational to say these are the results, or is it to get feedback?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
It's been iterative. We've gone to the public a couple of times
Right.
now, and, when you're earlier in the process, their input is very critical. Now it's really about us demonstrating to them that we've listened. If there are, and answering any questions they may have, user-type questions. And if there are new things that we haven't thought about that they introduce at that point, then we'll go back to the table, try to assimilate all of that. So, but this, we hope, will be the last round of public engagement.
Great. And so I know we never want to put a date on things until we're finished, but what sort of quarter of the year are we talking about where this may be implemented?
We're expecting that at the end of next year, we'll be rolling out this service.
Okay, awesome.
But again, we've always taken the approach that it's more important to listen, go back to the drawing board, get it right, because it's a once in a generational change. But given the number of changes and engagements we've had to date, we're anticipating the end of next year.
Okay, thank you so much.
Ms. Jones?
Slide 11, you have time transfer locations. You may have mentioned this. Is this only bus to bus, or is this bus to transit as well?
This would be bus to bus. So
Okay.
we have, and there are going to be some timed transfers designed at our rail stations, because those are also really important converging points for our bus service, plus that powerful rail connection. But the ones that I was speaking of there are really intended to be bus to bus and further away from the rail system, where we don't necessarily have those kinds of transfers easily available now. We're also looking to develop some reasonable infrastructure at those locations too. We want to make sure that when people are making those transfers, there's a sidewalk there. And that for a transfer that might get missed, if it happens, there's a shelter there for people to wait in, and some improvements like that at those locations too. So we really don't want to just have people standing in the grass on the side of the road where we're having them do these time transfers.
Good to hear. And then with the more frequent service, what is the anticipation for us to actually be able to provide that type of frequent service delivery?
Sure. So we're working with bus operations and are going to be tracking kind of our operator availability and make sure that we have everything as far as vehicles and operators in place to deliver that. And that also includes rolling out the new on-demand mode as well, so that'll have its own dedicated staff. But that's something we'll be tracking as the project goes on, and we plan to make some recalibrations if needed. We really want to make sure that this is a plan that we can roll out and that what we plan we can operate.
Mr. Durrett.
You mentioned micromobility in your presentation, and Janine, I appreciate your bringing up bicycles and how those things fit together. Going back to the guiding principle of future facing, I believe with all my heart that the future of this region's vitality and growth is going to depend upon robust public transportation and an adoption of the electric bicycle as the way that a lot more people need to be getting around. So if we're future facing, I think it's important to be thinking now rather than down the road about how people are going to be able to store their bicycles, and not assume that we're not going to be able to take bicycles on all of our buses and trains if people are adopting electric bikes to get around. So how can they safely store them? And if we're not thinking about that now, and not putting the onus just on us, but let's be talking with our local jurisdictions about how we can partner on this to plan for that and have the real estate to be able to do that. I think that's really important for us to be doing.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Ms. Jones?
Just following up to Jim's comment, want to follow up and saying that the city of Atlanta has an e-bike rebate program happening right now. There were more than 14,000 applications. So there is a real interest, and that was just for the city of Atlanta residents. So that's not including DeKalb and Clayton and South Fulton, which we did get interest from those entities as well. So, and to the point where some bike shops have started offering their own instant rebates. So the point that Jim has brought up is a very real factor, because people are looking for other ways to move about the area. And we want to be incorporated in that.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Kevin. Thanks, y'all.
Thank you.
I know that Colley is not finished with his GM CEO report, but I'm going to take a moment for a point of privilege and recognize a special guest that we have with us here today, Madam Chair-elect Dr. Alika Anderson-Henry, who is the incoming chairwoman for Clayton County. So I know we are all very excited in Clayton County and all the great things Dr. Anderson-Henry is going to bring to us. So thank you, and thank you for joining us today. Colley?
Thank you, Chair Power. I too wanted to make an introduction to the room. Mr. Stephen Parker's in the room with us. Mr. Parker, if you wouldn't mind standing. I think he wasn't expecting this. Stephen is the AGM of External Affairs. He comes to us from the Transportation Security Administration, where he was the Chief Information Officer. And prior to, Information Officer. Are you saying I'm wrong?
Don't worry.
Stephen was only with us for a minute.
I haven't recognized him. I haven't recognized him yet. We'll just not include that.
Innovation Officer, thank you. And Stephen was also the Deputy State Director under Senator John Ossoff, so a very influential and resourceful individual to be joining MARTA's ranks. Thank you, Stephen. Finally, Chair, I just wanted to mention a couple of things of upcoming events and meetings of significance. We already know about the committee and board meetings as outlined in your board packages, but also the Riders Advisory Council will meet on Wednesday, October 2nd from 6:30 till 8, and the MARTA Accessibility Committee will meet on Tuesday, November 12th from 10 a.m. till 11:30. We also have the Apt to Transform Conference happening in Anaheim on Sunday, September 29th. And that concludes my comments, Chair.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Greenwood. I want to follow up, and I think that was an excellent point that Ms. Scott brought up earlier about communication. And looking back over the minutes, it was on July 18th that was announced, but we didn't have a quorum, so there are no minutes to notify anyone. And certainly that should not be the only way that we communicate. So I think that that's an excellent point. I just wanted to go back and kind of flag that and acknowledge we've heard you, and I think that's a great point. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
And Mr. Andrews, is there something you wanted to add?
No, not
Before I
yet.
get to the next part, you're just in anticipation. All right. Are there any items for executive session?
Litigation matter.
Okay, may I have a motion to go into executive session for the purposes of real estate and litigation? Mr. Durrett moves. May I have a second? Ms. Blakely seconds. All in favor, please raise your hand. All right, we're in executive session. Thank you. All right, thank you. We'll call the meeting to order. Can I have a motion to approve the August the 8th, 2024 board meeting minutes? May I have a second? It's been properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, please vote. Public comments to report via email or voicemail.
I have no public comments from email or voicemail.
All right. We have several individuals who have signed up for public comments. The public will not be allowed to yield or donate time to other speakers. The public comment portion of the meeting will not exceed 45 minutes. If the 45-minute time limit is reached before public comments are completed, public comments will be suspended and the board meeting will commence. Public comments will resume at the end of the board meeting. As a reminder, there are 2 minutes per individual who has signed up to comment. First, may I have Dr. Alika Anderson-Henry.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, good day. I am Chairwoman Dr. Alika Anderson-Henry, and I want to say to all of you all, thank you for what you do. Thank you for your service, and thank you for stepping up to the plate. Also to Chairwoman Powell, it's so great to see you today. And I just want to say to all of the esteemed board members, Mr. Greenwood, and ladies and gentlemen in the audience today. I am Dr. Alika Anderson-Henry, Chairwoman-elect of the Clayton County Board of Commissioners. And today, I am proud to represent more than 300,000 residents, which includes 7 municipalities in Clayton County. 80% of our county sits in the Atlanta-Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport. Therefore, with all these great things, our county is destined to grow, whether it be through economic development, infrastructure improvements, or transportation projects that may help to attract more people to our county. I'm excited today to stand here before you. Let me move my hair out the way, y'all, so I can see really, really good. All right. To discuss an important topic that impacts our daily lives, and that is transportation. As our county continues to grow, it is vital that we explore various modes of transportation that will not only enhance mobility, but also improve the quality of life for all of our residents in Clayton County. We are looking at several innovative solutions to meet the diverse needs of our growing county. First, there's Bus Rapid Transit, BRT, which promises efficient and reliable service, reducing travel times and congestion. In Clayton County, we are excited about the future. Additionally, we have the opportunity to implement microtransit solutions, which provide flexible, on-demand rides that cater to our residents' specific needs, particularly in areas that are underserved by traditional public transit. Can I keep going, y'all? All right. Thank you. Another exciting option on the table is personal rapid transit, exemplified by glideways. These systems offer a convenient, automated means of transportation that can seamlessly connect neighborhoods to key destinations. Lastly, we cannot overlook the potential of commuter rail, which can link Clayton County with surrounding regions in a way that is both sustainable and practical. As we consider these options, it's crucial to prioritize accessibility, sustainability, and community engagement. Together, let us pave the way for a transportation network that serves all residents in Clayton County and enhance our vibrant municipalities. Thank you so much for allowing me to speak today before you, and I look forward to seeing you, hearing from you, and working with you as we move Clayton forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair-elect, and we are certainly excited as well. Mr. David Ward.
Good afternoon, MARTA Board of Directors, CEO Collie Greenwood, I want to first give recognition to our members of the Atlanta North Georgia Labor Council, Sandra, Eric, to my other labor leaders in the room, Yolanda and James and everybody else. I wanted to start, I stand before you today. I was the advocate for the union in the MARTA Reach grievance. Wanted to let you know that the union prevailed in that grievance, but MARTA has recently vacated that grievance, and I'm going to go into detail of what impact that now has. Your team has recently appropriated for RFPs to go out for mobilities, operations, and maintenance. I'm here today to tell you that the union has requested the information for these RFPs because they may be in direct violation of our current bargaining agreement. We currently have 4 grievances that's outstanding that address this point. It is imperative that we do not make the same mistake that we did with the mobility outsourcing. We all understand that arbitration is supposed to be final and binding, but MARTA doesn't think that. Outsourcing is not always the safest option. In the GTS, which is now a national, probably another company, they had more accidents for 100 workers than they had for all of bus transportation. We currently have 1,700 operators over in that division, and whenever you have 100 employees, that's on pace to surpass a department where you have almost 1,000% more individuals. That's a problem. We have to rethink this outsourcing that we're indulging into. Be conscious of what it does to the public long term and to the workers. On-time performance. With the outsourcing, we still have not validated or met the original intent of outsourcing paratransit, that was on-time performance and customer service. These things are tremendously failing in these outsourced properties and projects. MARTA used to have a standard. When I came in 2001, it was an honor to be a professional within the authority. I see that I got 2 zeros. Just give me 30 seconds and I wrap it up. It used to be an honor. Being an operator was like being a doctor or a lawyer. And it's no longer that. Our operators are assaulted on a daily basis. They're being antagonized, spit on, totally disrespected. Continue to work with your team, Collie, to get something done on the BIL committee to end these assaults against operators. Loyalty and efficiency. In our current bargaining agreement, we have a provision, paragraph 18, that says loyalty and efficiency. That provision says that the employees will vow to do efficient and safe and proficient work for MARTA. All we ask is that you do the same to us. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Yolanda King-Adams.
Good afternoon, MARTA Board, members of the committee, Mr. Greenwood. My name is Yolanda King-Adams. I'm a retired 21-year veteran of MARTA. During my tenure, my greatest reward and accomplishments was the service that I provided to our riding public and the appreciated service I provided to the public and the undaunted dedication in serving ATU Local 732. As an executive board officer, I am also serving on the Labor Management and Joint Health Safety Committee. As representatives of we bring forth concerns, issues and concerns that our frontline employees bring to our attention. On Wednesday, 8/28, Chief Davenport and Officer Phil Pott was on the Joint Health Safety Committee. We spoke on an assault which recently occurred at North Avenue Station, whereby it was admitted by Chief Davenport that there was no footage captured. On 9/4, there was a mass shooting at at a high school. On Labor Day, there was a mass shooting that took place on CTA. 4 people died on that day. An assailant was apprehended after being identified by the surveillance system of their system. And I'm sorry, I'm not under the gun, and sometimes I can be verbose. But the reason why I bring this to your attention is that we have continuously brought forth safety issues that have impacted the riding public and the frontline employees. We have antiquated systems of cameras not working, CCT not capturing events that have taken place. If these cameras are not working, then how then can MARTA police do the job in apprehending the assailant and resolving the issue, or at least bringing attention to whatever the crime is that has been committed? I have more to say, but I'm out of time.
Thank you. Mr. James Atkins.
Good afternoon, everyone. Again, my name is James Atkins. I'm the Vice President of Amalgamated Transit Union that services MARTA, Cobb, and Gwinnett counties. And I was going to yield my time to Mr. Ward, but I guess it was meant for me to come up here and speak. I want to let you guys know that we really do try to sit and provide this service, but there are some serious issues that we have that we need to address. And the one thing that I've noticed that this local hasn't been able to be voiceful enough to come out and let you guys know our side and what's actually going on out here. I know a lot of people say that they ride this system or they pass through this system, but we got people that's in this system 8 to 10 hours a day. And the things that you guys don't see, you know, or the things that you miss, we're capturing it, we're in it. And I'd like to be one of the people that let you guys know that we're gonna start showing up. We're gonna start giving you, you know, our side of the story and what we feel that, you know, it's a misjustice for us. You know, we talk a lot about absenteeism, and I sit on that sixth floor meetings when we discuss the issues on why people are not coming to work. And one of the biggest issues I said that it deals with is the pay. You know, it's kind of hard to come in here and you deal with what we deal with every day, and you're not even making the most in your state, let alone in your region or in the nation. And MARTA's up there. I think you guys talked last month about an award that we received that the members still don't know a lot about. So this stuff got to get out here to us. It's got to get out here to the public, and it's got to get back to the board, because we can't hold you guys accountable unless you know. So I'm letting you know now, you know, whether you want it or Kali, and I think Kali has been one that's been open to the discussions. He's always said that if we had issues, to come to him and talk to him about it. And I'm one that going to do that, and then hopefully going forward, we can make this system much better. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Matthew Rao.
Good afternoon, Chairperson Powers and CEO Greenwood and the other MARTA board members. I'm Matthew Rao. I chair the group Beltline Rail Now. And I'm here to talk about the consequences of the MARTA audit and the information in it to the transit expansion program in MARTA. As we all digest and understand the meaning of the MARTA audit presented by Mayor Dickens last month, I stand here to call on you, specifically MARTA's Board of Directors, to not only work with the results, but to chart the course forward and to take the necessary steps that will secure and accomplish the goals of the MARTA program, which is transit expansion. Here are 3 steps you could consider, advocate, and implement. 1, make the City of Atlanta whole at the earliest possible convenience with the return of the funding or the revenue that is supposed to be in the MARTA program. We don't know how much that will be. We are told it could be as high as $70 million. And we ask that you take a direct role in both the private and public part of this process. We all want the best for MARTA, and we all want to see more MARTA implemented. And I believe that you all have a critical role to play in seeing that that happens. 2, change the financial model for the MARTA program, increasing the amount of the sales tax revenue to 80% that goes into the transit expansion programs, up from the 55% that has been the case and is the case now. We believe that this is the only way to have a hope of building all 17 capital projects. And third, we advocate the immediate federalization of the Streetcar East project, which includes the first section of Beltline Rail, seeking not less than 40% through the Biden Infrastructure Act of grant money, and going for the gold, which would be 60% of that. SCE could enter, I beg for just a few more seconds, SCE could enter that federal program small starts immediately, given the preparatory work that MARTA has already done, and that would free up precious local dollars used for matching funds either to make a better project or to extend in a phase 2 that project. There are no doubt other actions you would take, but we believe that these 3 ideas form the core of something that will put more MARTA's transit expansion back on track. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Eric Richardson.
Hello, MARTA Board and CEO Greenwood. My name is Eric Richardson, and I'm the president of the Coalition of Black Trade Unionists. I've lived most of my life here in Atlanta. I know some of you haven't. We have certain traditions here in Atlanta. One is, I'm also on the MLK March Committee, and we have always partnered with MARTA to provide transportation on that day of the marchers and the marshals and the planning committee, back and forth, the dignitaries from the church to the march point. But I'm understanding that there's a little dispute between the CEO and the mayor. Has nothing to do with the March Committee. Why have you withdrawn that? And not only that, there's an event in the city every year with the seniors, the Mayor's Ball. Because of your dispute with the mayor, the city has had to spend $55,000 to provide transportation for those seniors to that event. But they have always looked forward to MARTA coming in and picking them up. Learn the traditions that are here in Atlanta. I know you're not from here, but you need to get into this city, recognize the traditions and the history, the long history. Because guess what? We all ain't gone away. And if we got to go back to the boycott in Alabama, we'll show you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sandra Williams.
Good afternoon, Board. Good afternoon, Chair Powell, and good afternoon, Mr. Greenwood. It is very difficult to come after Mr. Richardson because my comments are similar. We do have long-standing traditions, and I believe that all of you understand the importance of tradition and legacy here in the city of Atlanta. MARTA has a long, rich history of not only providing transportation, but of community service. I remember the first opportunity I had to meet with Mr. Greenwood. He actually came out to our Transit Equity Day, where he not only was celebrated as being the new person in charge of MARTA, but also to join us in the legacy and tradition of Rosa Parks. So we uplift that partnership. But I am here today because I am concerned that we understand and received a number of calls at the Atlanta North Georgia Labor Council, which I didn't say in my introduction. I'm the president of the Labor Council. So I represent some 60 affiliated unions. When we received the call saying, can you do anything to help, it was a little too late to actually place a call to Mr. Greenwood or to our labor unionist, Ms. Rita Scott, who is also on the board. But there is a lot of concern, not only then, but the tradition of Dr. Martin Luther King, where MARTA has been a long-standing partner on the day of the march. So we ask for your reconsideration. We ask that all the board come together and even join us for the MLK March. But it is an important tradition that we would like to continue to see upheld and the partnership with MARTA continue. So thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Lisa, and I can't tell if it's Gloves Groves. Okay, I apologize. I could not read the handwriting. All right.
I'm coming.
You are fine.
Okay, get it up here so y'all can see me.
You are fine.
Okay. Well, my name is Lisa Groves. I'm a disabled veteran. And if you Google me, google.com, Lisa Groves Veterans, I'm sorry. I'm a global traveling veterans advocate. Done 2 tours around after serving 8 years in the military, 32 years advocating assisting veterans, labor of love, don't get paid, don't charge veterans. Been on 2 missions, 48 states, Canada, Mexico in 2009, Providence, 1 territory of Canada, Alaska, advocating assisting veterans, and making sure no veteran left behind or their family members. But now I'm the veterans left behind because 3 years ago, because of blood surgeries, having steroid injection that hit my spine, left me in this chair. So I can't drive no more, and which was a big part of my life. So I have to rely on MARTA. Before I live in Sandy Springs, but I used to live in Duluth, so I would have to ride 2.2 miles to the nearest bus stop, wait for the bus, then catch the bus down to Lindbergh, need a train down to Lindbergh, get off at Lindbergh, go to number 6, which is a couple blocks over, and ride 35 minutes to get to my school. I go to school at Callawar Fine Arts Center. Well, number 6, a lot of times that was a bus ride from hell because the bus driver was very nasty. I got injured on the bus trip because she went and strapped me in. She screamed at my 2 little service dogs who's been sitting here all this time. Don't bother nobody. They pertain to my needs. Got rejected a claim I put in because he said the camera wasn't working, but the supervisor said that she talked to the operator. I mean, I'm suffering right now. I had to go acupuncture out of my own pocket and stuff because MARTA failed me when saying that I didn't have. Can I have a few more seconds? And also, just getting on the buses and having, I made complaints. I even supposed to had a meeting last Monday, but I forgot I had acupuncture. And Taylor, I called her the night before. She said, if you have any problem, come in. So she hasn't called me. I asked to talk to her supervisor. So it was like lack of respect when you in this chair of the bus drivers being nasty. I have put numerous complaints in. You can check up Lisa Groves. The way the bus driver has treated me in this mobility chair with these 2 service dogs, haven't bite nobody. Because you got to ask the police officers. They haven't had no complaints. But I just need help. I need help. And please do something about those nasty elevators. I get tired smelling urine. So that's all I got to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Those are all the public comments that we have received. We'll move now to the board committee reports. We'll start with the audit committee. Mr. Frierson.
Madam Chair, the Audit Committee met on Thursday, August 15, 2024, and received the following briefing. Internal audit activity, Q4 for FY24. Madam Chair, this concludes my report.
All right, thank you. We'll move now to Business Management Committee. Mr. Durrett.
Madam Chair, the Business Management Committee met on Thursday, August 22nd, 2024, and approved the following resolutions. A resolution authorizing the award of a contract for VMware vSphere Foundation Maintenance and Support Services, IFB B50525. B, resolution authorizing a modification and contractual authorization for maintenance and support for the Oracle database, ERP and ID management licenses, P27978. C, resolution authorizing the renewal of privacy and network security liability insurance coverage. And D, resolution authorizing a modification and contractual authorization for transit and digital advertising services, P48265. I request approval of these resolutions.
All right, can I have a motion and a second? It's been properly moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, please vote. Decide. Okay. The resolutions pass.
Madam Chair, this concludes my report.
All right. We'll move now to the Planning and Capital Programs Committee update. The Planning and Capital Programs Committee met on Thursday, August 22nd of 2024, and approved the following resolutions. A, resolution authorizing the commitment of local funds for the Atlanta Regional Commission ARC 2024 Transportation Improvement Plan project grant applications. B, resolution authorizing the disposal of a non-exclusive permanent easement to the City of Atlanta for reconstruction and maintenance of the Central Avenue Bridge near the intersection of Upper Alabama Street, MARTA parcel C1195A. C, resolution authorizing the disposal of a non-exclusive permanent easement to the Georgia Department of Transportation, GDOT, for Beltline West Side Trail Roadway Improvement Project along SR 14/Lee Street within GDOT Parcel 8, project number 0013810, MARTA parcel C4187B, Fulton County, Atlanta, Georgia. D, resolution authorizing the disposal of non-exclusive permanent easements to Georgia Power Company for utility relocation in support of the City of Atlanta Westlake Bridge replacement, MARTA parcel C2124E, Fulton County, Atlanta, Georgia. E, resolution authorizing the disposal of non-exclusive permanent easements to the Atlanta Development Authority, DBA Invest Atlanta, by and through its designated special agent, Atlanta Beltline for construction of the Beltline Northeast Corridor Project 009395, MARTA parcel C3231A, Fulton County, Atlanta, Georgia. Mr. Andrews, I see that your light is on.
Yeah, before you make a motion, if you could just hold on 1 second for me, please.
Right, I understand that we are now at 7 members, so you're looking to see if any of those are over 200K. While he's looking at that, do you have a question, Mr.? Well, let me get to it in just a moment. Let me get the motion in a second. You had your mic on, all right?
It appears B, C, D, and E are good to go at this time. I'm going to look into A a little further. If we can come back to it maybe after we do some of the other items.
Okay. So I will request approval of resolution B, C, D, and E. If I can have a motion. Mr. Durrett moves. If I can have a second. Mr. Frierson seconds. All in favor, please raise your hand. All right, it passes. In the meantime, while Mr. Andrews is looking up number A, the committee also received the following briefings. I-285 Express Lane Transit Planning Study. Also proposed bus service modifications for December 2024. Operational impacts for upcoming capital program work. Brookhaven Oglethorpe Station Platform Paver Replacement projects. Mr. Andrews, do we need to fully come back and move on to a new committee?
Please.
Okay. That concludes the report, except for Resolution A of the Planning and Capital Programs Committee. We'll move now to Operations and Safety. Mr. Pond.
Madam Chair, the Operations and Safety Committee met on Thursday, August 22nd, 2024, and received the following briefing. Final design of the compressed natural gas equipment replacement. Madam Chair, this concludes my report.
All right, thank you. Mr. Andrews?
Yes, ma'am. So, 1A, the resolution authorizing the commitment of local funds for the ARC TIP project grant applications does not appear to fall within the provision regarding awarding of a contract for construction, alteration, supplies, equipment, repairs, maintenance, or services over $200,000, so we should be good to go.
All right. Going back, we're going to request approval for the following resolution. A, resolution authorizing the commitment of local funds for the Atlanta Regional Commission ARC 2024 Transportation Improvement Plan project grant applications. If I can have a motion in a second.
I'll move approval unless, okay.
Any discussion? Please vote. All right, the resolution passes. Are there any other matters to come before the board?
Yes, ma'am, we have 4 matters that need to be approved. One is the approval of a settlement of $425,000 in the Tyrone Levy MARTA lawsuit.
Okay. If I can have a motion for approval of that settlement, Mr. Durrett moves. I will second. All in favor, any discussion? All in favor, please raise your hands. Ms. Ide? It passes.
I believe we did we? Yeah. The second matter that I would bring the attention of the board to is, as you're aware, the MARTOC chair and Georgia State Representative Deborah Silcox sent a letter to the authority recommending that KPMG take a look at the findings by Malden and Jenkins in the report they prepared for the City of Atlanta. I believe at the last meeting, Chair Powers and other members suggested moving forward with the recommendation. However, it would probably be more prudent to have an official action of the MARTA board so that we can go ahead and engage KPMG to expand their audit scope of the MARTOC report to include the review of the purported findings by Malden and Jenkins.
Okay. I will make a motion then that we accept the MARTOC recommendation by Representative Silcox that we expand and utilize the services of KPMG. Is there a second? Mr. Durrett seconds. All in favor, please raise your hand. All right. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Passes.
And then there's 2 other items. The first is a resolution authorizing the offer negotiation settlement of the property acquisition of MARTA parcel B130 in support of the South DeKalb Transit Center, DeKalb County, Georgia. I can only read the first page because for some reason I'm having trouble with my email right now. But this is the matter that was discussed in executive session. Do you have a copy of it? No, these are all the ones that were approved. Yeah. Give me 1 sec, sorry. I'm going to give it a shot. Whereas pursuant to the MARTA Act of 1965 as amended, MARTA exists for purposes of planning, designing, leasing, as leasee, purchasing, acquiring, holding, owning, constructing, improving, equipping, financing, maintaining, and administering a rapid transit system within the metropolitan area and operating the same. And whereas the MARTA Atlanta whereas MARTA operations staff has identified a public need to acquire property within unincorporated DeKalb County, Georgia, and the counties within the territorial jurisdiction of MARTA. Whereas MARTA has identified the location to support MARTA's bus network by constructing, operating, and maintaining a bus transit center located within the southern portion of the county, and whereas MARTA Planning and Capital Programs has identified that certain real property located at the South DeKalb Mall, DeKalb County, Georgia, State of Georgia, known as MARTA Parcel B130 for acquisition to facilitate the South DeKalb Transit Center, and whereas MARTA and the county executed a rapid transit contract and assistance agreement as amended, whereby the parties agreed to coordinate their efforts regarding the expansion of MARTA's rapid transit system, including without limitation the county agreeing to work with MARTA, and upon the request of MARTA to exercise its eminent domain power to acquire and property rights and interests necessary for MARTA to carry out its purposes, as stated in the MARTA Act. And whereas upon the county's approval, MARTA will submit offers to the fee owner or owners of the property in the amount of their appraised values. If negotiations for fair and equitable purchase terms are not successful, then MARTA will request the county initiate condemnation proceedings. Be it resolved, therefore, by the MARTA or by the Board of Directors of the Metropolitan Atlanta Rapid Transit Authority, in accordance with the policies and procedures previously adopted by the board, the acquisition of the property is hereby determined to be necessary for the expansion, construction, operation, and maintenance of the authority's transit system. Is hereby approved. Be it further resolved, therefore, that the GM, CEO, or his delegates are hereby authorized to offer and execute acquisition documents and all other agreements and settlements with the fee simple owners of the property. In the event of a mutual agreement or settlement is unsuccessful, to request DeKalb County to initiate condemnation proceedings.
Is that it?
That is it.
All right, I move approval. Mr. Pond seconds. Any discussions? I apologize, Mr. Price, I didn't see your hand either. Any discussion?
Yeah, she doesn't give us our copy.
All right, all in favor, please raise your hand. All right, it passes.
All right. Email's fully open now. So, resolution authorizing offer negotiation settlement for the property acquisition of MARTA parcels B2100, 280, and 281 of City of Stonecrest for the Stonecrest Transit Center, Stonecrest, DeKalb County, Georgia. Whereas pursuant to the MARTA Act of 1965 as amended, MARTA exists for the purposes of planning, designing, leasing, purchasing, acquiring, holding, owning, constructing, improving, equipping, financing, maintaining, and administrating a rapid transit system within the metropolitan area and operating the same. And whereas the MARTA operations staff has identified a public need to acquire property within the City of Stonecrest, DeKalb County, Georgia, and the city is within the territorial jurisdiction of MARTA. Whereas MARTA has identified the location to support MARTA's bus network by reconstructing, operating, and maintaining a bus transit center located within the city. Whereas MARTA Planning and Capital Programs has identified the certain real property adjacent to the Stonecrest Mall, City of Stonecrest, DeKalb County, State of Georgia, and known as MARTA parcels B200, B280, and B281, collectively referred to as property for acquisition to facilitate the Stonecrest Transit Center. And whereas MARTA and the county executed a rapid transit contract and assistance agreement as amended, and the MARTA and the city agreed to coordinate their efforts regarding the expansion of MARTA's rapid transit system, including without limitation, the city agreeing to work with MARTA and upon the request of MARTA to exercise its eminent domain power to acquire any property rights and interests necessary for MARTA to carry out its purpose as stated in the MARTA Act. And whereas upon the city's approval, MARTA will submit offers to fee owners of the property in the amount of appraised value. If negotiations for fair and equitable purchases terms are not successful, then MARTA will request the city initiate condemnation proceedings. Be it resolved, therefore, by the Board of Directors of the Metropolitan Atlanta Rapid Transit Authority that in accordance with the policies and procedures previously adopted by the board, the acquisition of the property is hereby determined to be necessary for the expansion, construction, operation, and maintenance of the authority's transit system, and hereby is approved. Be it further resolved, therefore, that the General Manager CEO as delegate is hereby authorized to offer and execute acquisition documents and any and all agreements and settlements with the fee simple owners for the acquisition of the properties, and in the event mutual agreement or settlement is unsuccessful, to request the City of Stonecrest to initiate condemnation proceedings. That is it.
All right, may I have a motion to approve? All right, Ms. Scott moves. And may I have a second? Mr. Durrett seconds. All in favor, please. Any discussion? Seeing none, please raise your hand if you're in favor. All right, it passes. Anything further, Mr. Andrews?
No, ma'am, thank you.
All right. Any other matters to come before the board? Mr. Greenwood.
If I may, thank you, Chair Power. I just wanted to correct the record on one item and be willing to speak to our guests afterwards. In terms of the MLK March, MARTA has supported the MLK March at least for the last 6 years. We'll go back further and make sure that that continues up to and including the most recent one, January 2024, with a commemorative bus as well as the bus used to transport people to and from the events, and we have no intention of discontinuing that practice. So I'll just make sure we speak personally and reiterate that to you. And I will also give you some context in terms of the mayor's ball comment. Thank you, Chair.
All right, thank you. Any other comments from the board? Ms. Jones.
Quick announcement, please. The City of Atlanta Department of City Planning is in the process of developing a new comprehensive development plan. They have recommendations around bike and pedestrian infrastructure, including access to transit. So they will be having public community meetings throughout the rest of the year until February on Monday, December 16th, they will be having their community meeting regarding transportation. So if anyone is interested, that will be on Monday, December 26th from 5:30 p.m. until 8 p.m. at Plywood Place at 933 Lee Street. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Seeing no other comments from the Board of Directors meeting is adjourned.